The Grand Hall stretched for nearly a mile in every direction. Ambassador Jake Morrison stood at the entrance and tried not to feel small. He had been to the Galactic Council chambers 3 times before, but the size of the place never stopped being impressive. Beside him, Commander Lisa Grant adjusted her uniform and whispered that they should get to their seats before the session started. They walked down the long corridor toward the human delegation area. Around them, representatives from hundreds of alien species moved in groups. Some floated on anti-gravity platforms. Others walked on legs that numbered anywhere from 2 to 12. A few didn't seem to have physical bodies at all, just contained fields of energy that pulsed with different colors. The human section was near the back of the chamber. Jake had long since stopped being bothered by that. Earth had only joined the Galactic Council 40 years ago. They were newcomers in a galaxy where some civilizations had been traveling between stars for over 50,000 years. Being seated near the back was expected. What bothered Jake more was the way other delegates looked at them. Or rather, didn't look at them. Most species simply ignored the human section entirely. The few who did glance their way usually had expressions that Jake had learned to recognize across different alien faces. Amusement, pity, sometimes both. Lisa settled into her seat and pulled up the holographic display that would show the day's agenda. Jake sat beside her and tried to relax. Today was the annual Military Assessment Summit. Every member species had to present their current defensive capabilities. It was supposed to be about transparency and cooperation. In reality, it was about showing off. The chamber lights dimmed and a massive holographic projection appeared in the center of the room. The council chairman materialized on a raised platform. His name was Korthax, and he represented the Vrex Empire. The Vrex were tall, almost 9 feet when fully upright, with dark scales and eyes that glowed a soft yellow. Korthax had been chairman for 8 years, which Jake knew was considered a short term by galactic standards. The annual defense assessment will now begin, Korthax announced. His voice was deep and resonated through the chamber without needing amplification. We will proceed in the traditional order. The Krell Dominion will present first. Jake settled in for a long day. There were over 800 species in the council. Even with each presentation limited to 10 minutes, this would take hours. He watched as the Krell representative, an ancient being that looked like it was made of living crystal, displayed their fleet capabilities. They had 40,000 warships. Their weapons could tear holes in space itself. Their shields could withstand direct hits from stellar phenomena. The chamber responded with respectful silence and approving gestures from dozens of species. Next came the Ashran Collective. They showed holographic images of their sleek silver vessels, beautiful and deadly. 28,000 ships, each one capable of moving faster than light without using traditional hyperspace. Their presentation included actual footage of their fleet in training exercises, moving in perfect formation like a school of fish. Polite applause followed. Species after species presented their military might. The numbers were staggering. Some had fleets in the hundreds of thousands. The weapons they described sounded more like science fiction than reality to Jake, even though he had been dealing with galactic technology for years now. Reality shapers, temporal disruptors, quantum annihilators. Finally, after 6 hours of presentations, Korthax called out the next name on the list. The human delegation from Earth will now present their defensive capabilities. Jake stood and walked to the presentation platform. Lisa accompanied him, carrying a data tablet with their prepared information. As they moved to the center of the chamber, Jake noticed something he hadn't seen during other presentations. Several delegates were already smiling. Not friendly smiles, the kind of smiles people make when they expect to be entertained. Jake cleared his throat and began. Thank you, Chairman. Earth currently maintains a defensive fleet of 2,400 warships. Our vessels utilize fusion-based propulsion systems with hyperspace capability. Our primary weapons are... A sound interrupted him. It took Jake a moment to identify it because it was so unexpected. Laughter. It started from the Vrex section, a harsh barking sound that other Vrex quickly joined. Within seconds, amusement rippled across the chamber. Different species had different ways of expressing humor, but Jake could recognize mockery in any language. 2,000 ships, someone called out. Jake couldn't see who. Did you say 1,000 or million? More laughter. Korthax made a gesture that was supposed to call for order, but Jake noticed the chairman was struggling not to smile himself. "Please continue, Ambassador Morrison," Korthak said, though his voice carried a tone of barely concealed amusement. Jake's jaw tightened, but he continued. "Our ships are equipped with nuclear-tipped missiles, railgun systems, and laser arrays. We have established defensive positions around our home system and our 7 colony worlds. Fusion drives?" A delegate from the Krell Dominion stood up. "You're presenting fusion drives at a military assessment? That technology is 12,000 years old by galactic standards." "Adorable," another voice added. This one came from an Ashran representative. "It's like watching a child show off their first toy." The chamber erupted in full laughter now. Even species that had been silent before joined in. Jake felt heat rising in his face. Beside him, Lisa's expression had gone completely neutral, which he knew meant she was furious but maintaining control. Korthax finally raised his hand for silence. It took almost a full minute for the chamber to quiet down. "Ambassador Morrison, I think we have heard enough. The Council appreciates Earth's effort in maintaining a defensive force. However, given the limited nature of your capabilities, we will be assigning Earth to Defense Tier 7. Jake's eyes widened. "Tier 7? Chairman, that tier is reserved for species that haven't achieved faster-than-light travel yet. We have 23 colonies across 14 light-years, which makes you slightly more advanced than a pre-FTL civilization," Korthax interrupted. "The Council has made its decision. Earth will be grouped with other developing species for defensive coordination. You should consider this an opportunity to learn from more experienced civilizations." "With all due respect," Jake started. The chairman's gavel came down hard. The sound echoed through the chamber like a thunderclap. "The decision is final. Ambassador Morrison, you may return to your seat. Young species should focus on listening and learning from their betters, not on challenging established protocols." Jake stood there for a moment, considering whether to argue further. But he could see it in Korthax's eyes, in the faces around the chamber. There was no point. They had already dismissed humanity. Nothing, he said, would change that. He and Lisa walked back to their seats in silence. As they passed different sections, Jake heard whispered comments. 2,000 ships. Might as well be 2,000 paper airplanes. I give them 20 years before some pirate fleet conquers their entire civilization. Did you see his face when we laughed? Priceless. Lisa sat down and immediately started organizing their materials, her hands moving with quick, angry precision. Jake sat beside her and stared at the holographic display without really seeing it. The presentations continued. More species showed off their vast armadas and their incredible weapons. The laughter from earlier had died down, but Jake could still feel the amusement hanging in the air like smoke. Humanity was a joke to these people. A cute little species playing at galactic civilization. When the session finally ended hours later, Jake and Lisa made their way back to the human delegation quarters. The building was small compared to the massive structures that housed other species, but it was comfortable. Earth had only 6 people stationed permanently at the Council headquarters. Jake as ambassador, Lisa as his deputy and military liaison, and 4 support staff. As they entered the building, they passed a group of delegates from the Rex Empire in the hallway. One of them, a young officer, was talking loudly enough for Jake and Lisa to hear clearly. "I'm taking bets on how long Earth lasts if a real threat shows up. I give them 3 days before they surrender." His companions laughed and continued down the hall without even glancing at the humans. Lisa's hand clenched into a fist, but Jake put a hand on her arm and shook his head. They walked in silence to Jake's private office. Once the door was closed and sealed, Lisa finally spoke. That was humiliating. "Yes," Jake agreed simply. He moved to his desk and sat down. "It was. Jake, we both know Earth's fleet is more capable than we showed. The stealth technology alone isn't something we advertised," Jake finished. He pulled up a secure communication terminal on his desk. "Lisa, I need you to leave the room for a few minutes." She looked at him with surprise. "Jake, please." "What I'm about to do is above your clearance level. Above mine too, technically. But I have authorization to make this call under specific circumstances." Lisa studied his face for a long moment, then nodded and left the office. Jake waited until the door sealed behind her before activating the communication system. He entered a code that he had memorized, but morning came to Zentara Prime with 2 suns rising in sequence. The first was white and bright, the second a deep orange that painted the sky in shades of copper. Jake Morrison stood at his window and watched the light spread across the council complex. He had not slept well. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the mocking faces from yesterday's session, but that wasn't why he couldn't sleep. What kept him awake was knowing what was about to happen. Lisa knocked on his door at exactly 7 in the morning. She entered carrying 2 cups of coffee, a human beverage that had become surprisingly popular among some alien species. She handed one to Jake without speaking. They stood together at the window and drank in silence. "Are you going to tell me what you did?" Lisa finally asked. "You'll find out soon enough," Jake replied. "The whole galaxy will." At 8 o'clock, they walked together to the council chambers. The session was scheduled to begin at 9, but Jake wanted to be early. He wanted to see the moment when they discovered what had happened. The chamber was already filling with delegates when they arrived. Jake and Lisa took their seats in the human section. Around them, conversations flowed in dozens of languages. Most delegates seemed relaxed, even cheerful. Yesterday's presentations were over. Today would be routine fleet positioning reports, boring but necessary administrative work. Korthax entered the chamber at exactly 9 o'clock and took his place on the chairman's platform. He activated the central holographic display that showed a map of the entire galaxy. Millions of small lights indicated registered military vessels from member species. "Good morning," Korthax began. "We will now conduct standard fleet positioning verification. This is a routine check to ensure all military assets are properly logged and accounted for. We will proceed alphabetically by species designation." Jake leaned back in his seat and waited. Lisa glanced at him several times, clearly confused by his calm demeanor. The first few species reported without incident. Their fleet positions matched the galactic tracking system perfectly. Everything was normal. The council secretary read out numbers and coordinates in a steady, monotonous voice that made several delegates appear to be falling asleep. Then came Earth's turn. "Human delegation," Korthax called out. "Please confirm your fleet positions." Lisa stood up and activated their data connection to the main display. Jake saw her hand freeze on the control panel. Her eyes went wide. She looked down at Jake with an expression of complete shock. "Ambassador Morrison," she said quietly, There's something wrong with the system." "What kind of wrong?" Korthax asked, sounding bored. Lisa's voice was shaking slightly. "According to the Galactic Tracking Network, Earth's military fleet is showing 0 vessels in registered space." The chamber went quiet. Delegates who had been dozing sat up. Korthax leaned forward on his platform. "That's obviously an error," he said. "Run a diagnostic on your connection." Lisa's fingers moved across the holographic controls. Jake watched her go through 3 different diagnostic protocols. Each one came back with the same result. She looked up at Korthax with a pale face. "Chairman, the connection is functioning perfectly. The system is showing that every human military vessel has disappeared from tracked space. All 2,400 ships. The silence in the chamber became absolute. You could have heard a pin drop from a mile away." Korthax stood up. "That's impossible. Ships don't just disappear. Expand the search parameters. Check for hyperspace signatures, emergency broadcasts, distress signals." A Virex technician rushed to assist Lisa. Together they worked the controls, expanding the search across human-controlled space. Jake watched the main display as it showed sector after sector. The results were the same everywhere. No ships. No energy signatures. No hyperspace trails, nothing. "This has to be a malfunction," the Krell representative said, standing up. "Perhaps the humans have simply disabled their tracking transponders." "Even if they did that, our systems would show residual quantum signatures," the technician replied. "We're not finding anything. It's like the ships were never there." More delegates stood up now. Conversations broke out across the chamber. The calm, boring morning had suddenly become very interesting. "Ambassador Morrison." Korthax's voice cut through the noise. "What is the meaning of this? Where is your fleet?" All eyes turned to Jake. He stood slowly and looked up at the chairman. "I don't know," Jake said calmly. "Perhaps they got lost." The chamber erupted. Dozens of species shouted questions at once. Korthax banged his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. "Security," Korthax shouted. "Detain the human delegation immediately. They are not to leave this complex until we have answers." 2 large Vrex security officers appeared at Jake's sides. They weren't rough, but they made it clear he had no choice. Lisa was similarly escorted. They were taken to a secure conference room in the security wing of the complex. The room was small and plain. A table, 4 chairs, and walls that Jake knew were monitored by at least 20 different sensors. He and Lisa sat on one side. Korthax entered a few minutes later with 2 other council members. A Krell named Zethar and an Ashran called Minara. Explain, Korthax said without sitting down, and do not waste our time with games. I genuinely don't know where the fleet is, Jake said. This was true. He had given the order to initiate Protocol Exodus, but he didn't know the details of what that actually meant. Only a handful of people in Earth's military knew the full plan. You expect us to believe that your entire military vanished overnight and you know nothing about it? Minara's voice was musical, almost pretty, but filled with suspicion. Lisa spoke up. Chairman, I'm Earth's military liaison to the Council. I had no knowledge of any fleet movements. This is as much a surprise to me as it is to you. Perhaps, Zethar said. The humans have suffered some kind of catastrophic system failure, an accident that destroyed their entire fleet simultaneously. Our sensors would have detected that much destruction, Korthax replied. We're not talking about a few ships. 2,000 vessels don't explode without leaving evidence. Then where are they? Minara demanded. Jake met her eyes calmly. I don't know, but I'm sure they'll turn up eventually. The interrogation continued for 3 hours. They asked the same questions in different ways. Jake and Lisa gave the same answers. Finally, Korthax dismissed them back to their quarters with guards posted outside. They weren't technically prisoners, but they also weren't free to leave. In Jake's office, Lisa finally let her composure crack. Jake, what the hell did you do? Where is our fleet? I don't know the details, Jake admitted. But I know they're safe. And I know this was necessary. Necessary? Jake, the entire galaxy thinks we're either idiots who lost our fleet or preparing for some kind of attack. This could start a war. Jake walked to his window and looked out at the council complex. In the distance, he could see ships coming and going. Scout vessels being dispatched, no doubt. The galaxy was mobilizing to find Earth's missing fleet. Lisa, do you remember yesterday? How they laughed at us? How they dismissed everything we said? Of course I remember. I was there. That's been happening for 40 years, Jake continued. Every session, every meeting, every interaction. We're the joke of the galaxy. The primitive humans with our adorable little ships and our outdated technology. So this is about pride? Lisa's voice rose. You made our entire military disappear because your feelings were hurt? Jake turned to face her. No. This is about showing them that they don't know us as well as they think they do. They see us as simple, predictable, weak. What's the best way to prove them wrong? By hiding our entire fleet like children playing games? By doing something they believe is impossible, Jake corrected. Think about it, Lisa. We're 40 years into galactic civilization. We have the smallest fleet of any council member, the oldest technology, the least respect. But overnight we made 2,000 ships vanish without a trace, ships that the galaxy's best tracking systems can't find. How did we do that? Lisa opened her mouth, then closed it. Jake could see her mind working through the implications. They don't know, she said slowly. Exactly, and not knowing is driving them crazy. Look, Jake activated his desktop display and showed Lisa the Council's emergency broadcasts. Every major power in the galaxy had mobilized search teams. The Vrex Empire had dispatched hunter squadrons. The Krell had activated their legendary seeker arrays. The Ashran had sent out ships equipped with sensors that could supposedly track a single atom across light years. They're spending more resources, looking for our fleet in one day than they spent, acknowledging our existence in a decade, Jake said. Do you see? We're not the joke anymore. We're the mystery, the unknown variable, and every hour they can't find us, that respect grows. Over the next several days, reports flooded into the Council, each one more puzzling than the last. A Vrex patrol had detected strange sensor readings near Krell space. A merchant vessel reported unusual quantum signatures before their instruments failed for 17 seconds. A mining colony detected hundreds of unknown contacts, but the data corrupted before they could analyze it. The galaxy was seeing ghosts, hints and shadows of something that might be human ships, but nothing concrete, nothing they could track or verify. Jake and Lisa were eventually released from detention when it became. The holographic display showed something emerging from deep space. Not from normal hyperspace jump points, but from everywhere at once. Hundreds of quantum signatures resolving into real space around Zentara Prime's outer system. Korthax worked, his controls frantically pulling up more detailed scans. "Get me identification on those signatures, now." A Krell technician standing at a secondary station called out in a voice that shook with fear. "Chairman, the signatures don't match anything in our database. The energy readings are. They're organic." "Living ships." "Living ships?" Minara stood up from her seat. "That's impossible. Biological vessels can't survive in deep space." "These ones can," the technician replied. "Chairman, I'm getting visual confirmation from our outer sensor stations." The display changed to show actual images from automated observation posts at the edge of the system. What Jake saw made his stomach drop. The ships were huge, each one easily a mile long. They looked like they had been grown rather than built. Curved organic shapes covered in what looked like armored plates made of bone. They pulsed with a sickly green light that seemed to come from within their structures. "How many?" Korthax demanded. 300 contacts and counting. They're forming a sphere around our system." The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted questions and orders. Some species began evacuating toward the exits. Security tried to maintain order but were overwhelmed by the panic. Jake grabbed Lisa's arm. "Do you know what these things are?" "No," Lisa replied, her face pale. "But look at the formation. That's not exploration. That's an invasion pattern." Korthax's voice boomed through the chamber's speakers, cutting through the noise. "All delegates will remain calm. Our defense fleet is moving to intercept. The Centaura system has the strongest military presence in the galaxy. Whatever these vessels are, they will not." The display flickered and changed again. It showed the Council's defense fleet engaging the unknown vessels. Over 4,000 warships from dozens of different species, all stationed permanently at Centaura Prime to protect the Council. They opened fire as soon as they came within range. The weapons fire was beautiful and terrible. Plasma beams that could melt planets. Kinetic missiles moving at relativistic speeds. Energy lances that tore through the fabric of space itself. Every weapon hit the organic vessels dead on. For a moment, Jake felt hope. The alien ships were taking damage. Armor plates shattered. Organic material burned away. Surely nothing could survive that much firepower. Then the alien vessels returned fire. The weapons they used didn't look technological. They seemed to grow from the ship's hulls, organic cannons that fired some kind of bioenergy. When the energy hit Council ships, their shields failed instantly. The hulls didn't explode. They dissolved. Metal, composite materials, energy fields, everything simply melted away like ice in a fire. "Status report," Korthax shouted. "We've lost 280 ships," the technician called back. His voice was shaking. First contact to destruction was 6 minutes. 6 minutes. The mightiest defensive fleet in the galaxy had lost nearly 7% of its forces in 6 minutes. "Continue the attack," Korthax ordered. "Focus fire on individual targets. Coordinate strikes." "Chairman, the enemy is adapting. Our weapons are becoming less effective with each hit. It's like they're learning our attack patterns in real time." Jake watched in horror as the battle continued. The Council forces kept attacking, but the alien vessels were spreading out now, surrounding smaller groups of defenders and overwhelming them. More ships disappeared from the display every few seconds. The organic vessels barely slowed down. "What are these things?" Lisa whispered. An old Krell delegate stood up from her seat. Jake recognized her as historian Velmoth, one of the Council's senior advisors on ancient galactic events. Her crystalline body was shaking. "I know what they are," Velmoth said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "They're called the Devourers. I thought they were myth, stories from ancient times to frighten children." "Explain," Korthax demanded. "They come from beyond our galaxy," Velmoth continued. "Every few thousand years they enter through dark space and consume everything organic in their path. Entire sectors stripped of all life. Planets left as barren rocks. Our oldest records mention them, but the last confirmed sighting was over 8,000 years ago. Most species stopped believing they were real. How do we stop them?" Minara asked. Velmoth's silence was answer enough. The battle in orbit was turning into a massacre. The Council forces were brave and well-trained, but they were facing something they didn't understand. Their tactics, developed over thousands of years of civilized warfare, meant nothing against an enemy that didn't follow any known rules. "Chairman, we've lost 600 ships now," the technician reported. "Defense Fleet Command is requesting permission to fall back and regroup." Korthax looked at the display for a long moment. Jake could see the struggle on his face. The chairman was used to being in control, used to having answers. But he had no answers for this. "Granted," Korthax finally said. "All council ships are to retreat to inter-system defensive positions. Begin evacuation protocols for the council complex. Chairman, we can't evacuate 800 species in, then prioritize. Get as many out as possible. Start with species whose ships are already in orbit." The chamber dissolved into controlled chaos. Delegates rushed for the exits. Emergency broadcasts echoed through the building. Jake and Lisa were swept along with the crowd toward the evacuation staging areas. They had almost reached the exit when every screen in the building flickered and changed. A human face appeared. Jake recognized her immediately. Captain Amy Rodriguez, one of Earth's top military intelligence officers. He had met her exactly twice, both times in heavily classified briefings. "This is Captain Rodriguez of Earth Defense Command," Amy's voice said from every speaker. "This message is being broadcast to all council systems. I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but given current circumstances, I needed to get everyone's attention." The evacuation stopped. Everyone stared at the screens. "For the past week, you've been wondering where humanity's fleet disappeared to," Amy continued. "The answer is simple. We've been tracking the approach of the Devourers for the past 3 months." Gasps and shouts erupted around Jake. Lisa grabbed his arm hard enough to hurt. 3 months? Korthax's voice came through the communication system. "How did you know they were coming?" Amy's expression didn't change. "Because we were looking. While the galaxy was focused on politics and territory, Earth was watching the dark spaces. We saw them enter the galaxy at the outer rim. We tracked their trajectory and calculated their destination, Centaura Prime. And you said nothing." Minara's voice was sharp with anger. "You let us gather here knowing this threat was coming." "We tried to warn you," Amy replied calmly. 3 weeks ago, Ambassador Morrison requested an emergency session to discuss a potential extragalactic threat. He was denied. 2 weeks ago, Commander Grant submitted a detailed report on unusual sensor readings from deep space. It was dismissed as sensor errors. You didn't want to listen to the primitive humans with their adorable technology. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. That was true. He had tried to get the council's attention. They had brushed him off. "So, Protocol Exodus," Lisa said quietly. "Wasn't about hiding," Jake finished. "It was about positioning." On the screen, Amy transmitted a set of coordinates. "These coordinates mark the Devourer's current position and projected path. If you want to see what humanity learned during our centuries of being young and primitive, watch these coordinates very carefully. Captain Rodriguez out." The screens went dark. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Korthax's voice came through again. "Someone get me a scan of those coordinates. Now." Jake and Lisa pushed their way to the nearest functional terminal. They pulled up the scanner display and entered the coordinates Amy had provided. The image that appeared made Jake's heart race. "There's nothing there," Lisa said. "Just empty space along the Devourer's path." "Look closer," Jake replied. "What do you see?" Lisa zoomed in the display, adjusting filters and scanning through different spectrums. "I see. Wait. There are gravity anomalies, dozens of them, no, hundreds. They're scattered throughout that entire sector. Gravity anomalies that the Council's sensors read as natural phenomena," Jake said. "Background noise. Nothing worth investigating." Understanding dawned on Lisa's face. "They're there. The fleet is there. They've been there the whole time." "Stealth technology," Jake confirmed. "Not the kind that hides you from sensors. The kind that makes sensors think you're something else entirely. Natural cosmic debris, gravity wells, background radiation. The Devourers are about to fly right through a sector filled with human ships, and they have no idea." "Why are you telling them this?" A voice behind them made Jake turn. Korthax had entered the room, along with several other council members. Why give away your tactical advantage? Jake looked at the Rex chairman. Because despite your mockery, despite dismissing us and laughing at our capabilities, you're still people who don't deserve to die, and because you need to understand something very important about humanity. And what's that? Korthax asked. That we learned a long time ago that being underestimated is sometimes. The first human ships to move weren't the big warships. They were destroyers, small and fast compared to the massive Devourer vessels. Lieutenant Commander Paul Henderson led the first strike wing, and Jake watched as those destroyers did something completely unexpected. They didn't shoot at the Devourers. They shot at planets. What are they doing? Korthax demanded. They're firing at uninhabited worlds in the inner system. Lisa's eyes went wide as she understood. They're not trying to destroy the planets. They're creating debris clouds. She was right. The human weapons hit the rocky inner planets at precise points, triggering massive explosions that sent billions of tons of rock and dust into space. The debris spread quickly, forming massive clouds right in the path of the Devourer formation. But debris moves slowly, Minara said. Those creatures can easily avoid. The debris isn't moving slowly, Jake interrupted. Look at the trajectory. Those planets are close to the system's star, high orbital velocity. That debris is moving at relativistic speeds. The Devourers apparently realized this at the same moment. The organic vessels tried to adjust course, but they were already committed to their formation. They were moving too fast to stop or turn sharply. The lead vessels slammed into the debris clouds at tremendous velocity. The impacts weren't enough to destroy the Devourers. Their organic armor was incredibly strong, but the collision slowed them down, damaged them. More importantly, they disrupted the tight formation the creatures had been maintaining. They're separating, the council technician reported. The Devourer formation is breaking apart. That's exactly what the humans wanted, Jake said quietly. The moment the Devourers were separated, the second phase of the human attack began. Captain Nicole Warren's carrier group moved into position. Her ships launched thousands of small craft. They were too small to show up clearly on the council's displays, but Jake could see their effect. What are those? Zethar asked. Drone fighters, Lisa replied. Each one is automated, about the size of a personal transport. No crew to risk. What good are tiny ships against those monsters? Korthax asked. They got their answer quickly. The drone fighters didn't attack the Devourers directly. Instead, they positioned themselves in spheres around individual enemy vessels. Hundreds of drones surrounding each Devourer ship, maintaining precise distances. They're activating something, the technician said. Energy signatures from the drones are spiking. Space around each Devourer began to distort visibly. The organic vessels started moving strangely, twisting and turning as if they were being pulled in multiple directions at once. Gravity manipulation, Jake explained. Humanity developed it for asteroid mining. If you need to move a billion-ton rock, you don't push it. You use localized gravity fields to pull it where you want it. Those drones are creating competing gravity wells around each Devourer ship. Pulling them apart? Lisa added, her voice filled with amazement. The Devourers were strong, but even organic ships had limits. Being pulled in 12 different directions simultaneously put enormous stress on their structures. Some of the creatures tried to fire their bioweapons at the drones, but the small craft were too fast and too numerous. For every drone destroyed, 2 more moved in to take its position. The Devourers are slowing down, the technician reported. They're burning energy trying to fight the gravity wells. Their formation is completely broken now. That's when the main human battle line opened fire. Admiral Connor Blake commanded from the carrier EFS Defiance. His fleet had positioned themselves in a perfect crossfire pattern, waiting for exactly this moment. The human ships fired their weapons, and Jake felt a surge of pride watching it happen. The council members were right about one thing. Human weapons weren't as powerful as galactic technology. A single human missile carried maybe 1/10 the destructive force of a Krell plasma lance. A human railgun couldn't punch through shields the way a Vrex energy weapon could. But the humans weren't fighting a civilized war. They were fighting the way they had learned to fight in Sol system. Brutally, efficiently, and from positions the enemy never expected. The Devourers had committed to flying through a specific corridor of space. The human fleet had spent 3 months studying that corridor, calculating trajectories, plotting firing solutions. Every shot was aimed not at where the Devourers were, but at where they had to be. The organic vessels tried to dodge, but they were already slowed by the gravity wells and scattered by the debris clouds. They moved right into the human firing patterns. Missiles that had been launched minutes earlier arrived at exactly the right moment. Railgun slugs moving at fractional light speed hit targets that couldn't maneuver away. More importantly, the humans had done their homework. The Council's attack had shown that the Devourers could adapt to repeated weapon strikes. So the humans didn't use repeated strikes. Every salvo was different. Different weapons, different angles, different approaches. Missiles with nuclear warheads. Kinetic projectiles. Directed energy weapons. Chemical explosives. Even old-fashioned ballistic rounds fired from magnetic accelerators. The Devourers' adaptive defenses couldn't keep up with the constant variation. "They're hurting them," Korthak said suddenly. "Look at the firing patterns. The humans aren't trying to destroy the Devourers outright. They're pushing them into specific areas." Jake smiled grimly. "Like I said, we learned to fight outnumbered and outgunned. You don't win those fights by being stronger. You win by being smarter." The areas the Devourers were being herded into suddenly lit up on the display. Massive energy signatures that hadn't been there moments before. "Minefields," Lisa breathed. They seeded the entire sector with mines while they were supposedly hidden. The Devourers flew right into the minefields. The mines were simple devices by galactic standards, just explosive charges with basic proximity sensors, but there were thousands of them, positioned in carefully calculated patterns. The first Devourer to hit the minefield triggered a chain reaction. Explosions rippled through the organic vessel's hull, tearing it apart from the inside. The creature tried to heal itself, its organic nature letting it regenerate damage, but more mines detonated before it could recover. Other Devourers tried to avoid the minefields, but that meant moving into even heavier concentrations of human weapons fire. They were trapped between two bad choices. Every direction they turned, humans were waiting. The battle lasted 22 minutes from the moment the human fleet revealed itself. When it was over, 200 Devourer vessels were destroyed or so badly damaged they were no longer combat effective. The remaining 100 scattered, abandoning their invasion formation and fleeing back toward the outer system. The council chamber was absolutely silent. On the display, human ships moved through the battlefield, scanning for survivors and beginning rescue operations. Not just searching for human survivors. They were actively looking for surviving crews from the council ships that had been destroyed in the initial attack. "Casualty report," Korthak said quietly. "Human fleet lost 47 vessels." The technician replied, his voice shaking slightly. "Council defensive forces lost 630 ships total. The humans are transmitting medical and engineering support protocols to all surviving council vessels." "They saved us," Minara said softly. "Those primitive humans with their adorable fusion drives just saved the entire Galactic Council." "They didn't just save us," Zethar corrected. "They did what our combined fleet couldn't do. They broke an invasion by the Devourers, something that hasn't been successfully done in recorded history." Jake felt Lisa's hand on his shoulder. He turned to look at her. She had tears in her eyes. "You knew," she said. "You knew this was coming and you didn't tell me." "I couldn't," Jake replied. "Protocol Exodus was classified above my level. Above almost everyone's level. Only the top military leadership knew the full plan. All I could do was initiate it and trust that our people would be ready." "Were you scared?" Lisa asked. "Terrified," Jake admitted. "I gave an order that made our entire fleet disappear. If I was wrong, if this had just been about pride or politics, I would have been responsible for leaving Earth defenseless. But I trusted Admiral Hayes. I trusted that he wouldn't have created Protocol Exodus unless there was a real reason for it." On the display, a new transmission came through. Admiral Connor Blake appeared on screen. He looked tired but satisfied. Behind him, Jake could see the bridge of the Defiance with crew members working at various stations. "This is Admiral Blake to Zentara Prime Command. The immediate threat has been neutralized. Remaining hostile vessels are in retreat. We are beginning search and rescue operations for all casualties. Human medical ships are standing by to assist with wounded from all species." Korthak stepped forward. For the first time since Jake had known him, the Vrex chairman looked uncertain. "Admiral Blake, this is Chairman Korthax. On behalf of the Galactic Council, we owe you a debt that cannot be easily repaid. You saved countless lives today." "With respect, Chairman, we didn't do this for debt or gratitude," Connor replied. "We did it because it needed to be done. The Devourers are a threat to all organic life. Stopping them benefits everyone, including Earth. Still, you must allow us to properly think. There will be time for that later, Chairman, Connor interrupted gently. 3 days after the battle, the Galactic Council reconvened in a temporary chamber while the main hall was being repaired. The Devourer attack had caused significant damage to the complex, though nothing that couldn't be fixed. The real damage had been to the Council's confidence and assumptions about how the galaxy worked. Jake walked into the chamber with Lisa beside him. This time they weren't seated in the back. The Council had moved the human delegation to a position of honor near the front. Several delegates nodded respectfully as they passed. A few even stood in gestures of respect that varied by species. The change was remarkable. 1 week ago, these same beings had laughed at humanity. Now they watched Jake with expressions that ranged from curiosity to outright respect. Some even looked nervous, as if they were seeing humans for the first time and weren't quite sure what to make of them. Korthax called the session to order. He stood at the chairman's platform, but his posture was different. Less commanding, more humble. This emergency session has been called to address several critical matters, Korthax began. First, the threat posed by the Devourers. Second, the restructuring of our defensive capabilities. And third, the formal recognition of Earth's contributions to galactic security. He paused and looked directly at Jake. Ambassador Morrison, before we proceed with official business, I want to personally apologize for the treatment you and Commander Grant received at our last regular session. The mockery you endured was inappropriate and, as recent events have proven, based on fundamental misunderstandings of human capabilities. Jake stood slowly. Chairman, I appreciate the apology, but I think we need to be clear about something. The problem wasn't just the mockery. The problem was that it represented 40 years of systematic dismissal. Every time humanity tried to contribute to council discussions, we were ignored. Every time we offered insights based on our experiences, we were told to learn from our betters. The laughter at that session was just the visible symptom of a deeper issue. You're right, Korthax admitted, and that issue exists because the council has become comfortable. We've had relative peace for thousands of years. Small conflicts, yes. Territorial disputes. Political tensions. But no existential threats. We forgot that the galaxy can be dangerous. You forgot that progress doesn't always mean bigger weapons, Jake added. Human technology might be older by your standards, but we've spent centuries learning how to use what we have effectively. You have plasma weapons that can melt planets. We have kinetic missiles and good aim. Different tools, same result when applied correctly. Minara stood up from her seat. Ambassador, many of us have been reviewing the battle recordings. The tactics your fleet used were unlike anything in our military databases. The way you manipulated the battlefield, used environmental factors, coordinated attacks from unexpected positions. Where did humanity learn to fight like that? From fighting ourselves, Jake replied honestly. For most of human history, we were our own worst enemy. We fought wars across every continent on Earth. We developed weapons specifically to kill other humans. We learned tactics by seeing what worked against opponents who thought like us, who were just as smart and just as desperate to survive. A dark history, Zethar observed. Yes, Jake agreed. One we're not proud of. But it taught us things that species who achieved space travel without going through that crucible might not understand. We learned that being weaker doesn't mean you have to lose. We learned that the enemy's strength can become their weakness if you're clever enough. We learned that survival sometimes means doing things that aren't pretty or honorable, just effective. And you brought those lessons to galactic civilization, Korthax said. We did. And for 40 years you told us those lessons were primitive, that we needed to think bigger like you do, build better weapons, develop more advanced technology. But when the Devourers came, all your advanced technology couldn't stop them. You know why? Because your military doctrine is based on civilized warfare. Territorial disputes between rational species who follow established rules. The Devourers don't follow rules. They just consume. And that's a kind of threat we understood better than you did. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then a delegate from a species Jake didn't recognize stood up. Ambassador Morrison, are you saying that humanity's history of violence makes you better warriors than the rest of us? Jake shook his head.
No. I'm saying our history of violence taught us to think differently about warfare.
You see military strength as a display, a deterrent, something to show off during these assessment sessions. We see it as a tool that exists for one purpose, protecting what matters when everything else fails. Your fleets are designed to look impressive. Ours are designed to win fights we're supposed to lose. That's a terrifying philosophy, Minara said quietly. It's a survival philosophy, Lisa spoke up. Earth isn't a paradise world like Ashran Prime. We don't have infinite resources like the Krell Dominion. We're one small planet with limited space and limited materials. For thousands of years, every human nation competed with every other nation for those resources. We couldn't afford to lose. So we learned to win even when it seemed impossible. Another delegate stood. What about now? Humanity has been part of galactic civilization for 40 years. You have access to other worlds, unlimited resources. Will you continue this aggressive approach? Aggressive? Jake felt anger flash through him. We just saved this council from complete destruction. We positioned our fleet to protect you, knowing we might all die in the attempt. We could have stayed hidden, let the Devourers destroy Zentara Prime and then claimed ignorance. Instead, we fought for you. How is that aggressive? Peace, Korthax said, raising his hands. The delegate's question was poorly phrased, but the concern is legitimate. Humanity has demonstrated remarkable military capabilities that we didn't know existed. Some members are naturally concerned about what that means for galactic stability. Jake took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. Let me be very clear. Earth has no interest in conquest or domination. We have 7 colonies and we're happy with them. We trade peacefully with dozens of species. We contribute to council initiatives and follow galactic law. The only reason we developed advanced tactical doctrine was because we saw a threat coming and we knew we needed to be ready. The Devourers, Zethar said. Yes. 3 months ago, our deep space observation network detected unusual movement in the outer galaxy. We investigated and confirmed what historian Velmoth said. The Devourers had returned. We calculated their trajectory and realized they were heading straight for the most populated region of the galaxy. Zentara Prime. Why didn't you simply tell us? Minara demanded. Why the secrecy? We tried, Lisa said firmly. Ambassador Morrison requested an emergency session 3 weeks ago. Denied. I submitted a detailed report on the sensor findings. It was dismissed as equipment malfunction. We sent 7 separate messages to various council military commands. None were taken seriously. Why? Because they came from humans. From the joke species with the primitive technology. She pulled up a holographic display showing all the communication attempts. Date stamps, recipient information, response codes. Every single one marked as low priority or dismissed entirely. We realized that no one would take us seriously until we proved we were worth listening to, Lisa continued. So Admiral Hayes and Earth's top military leaders developed Protocol Exodus. Make our entire fleet disappear, force the galaxy to notice us, and while everyone was looking for our ships, we were positioning them exactly where they needed to be. A gamble, Korthax observed. A calculated risk, Jake corrected. If the Devourers hadn't shown up, we would have looked foolish. But we knew they were coming. We just needed to be ready, and you were, Zethar said. More ready than any of us. Korthax nodded slowly. Which brings us to the official business of this session. The Council owes Earth a formal debt of gratitude, but beyond that, we need to restructure how we think about galactic defense. The Devourers are still out there. The 100 vessels that escaped will eventually regroup. They might return, or they might attack another sector. We need to be prepared. And you need humanity's help, Jake said. Not a question. A statement. Yes, Korthax admitted. We need your tactical expertise, your strategic thinking, your ability to fight against overwhelming odds. Ambassador Morrison, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally offer Earth a position on the Defense Strategic Command. This is the highest military authority in the Council, responsible for coordinating defensive operations across all member species. The chamber erupted in conversation. This was unprecedented. The Defense Strategic Command had only 12 positions, held by the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Offering one to Earth, a species everyone had considered barely relevant just days ago, was a massive shift. Jake looked at Lisa. She gave him a small nod. They had discussed this possibility during the past 3 days. Chairman, we accept, Jake said, but with conditions. Conditions? Korthax raised his brow ridge, which Jake had learned was the Vrex equivalent of surprise. First, humanity will share our tactical doctrines and strategic philosophies with the Council military. We'll help train combined forces in the kind of adaptive warfare we used against you.